She is behind one of the largest military leaks in U.S. history. Chelsea Manning changed the way the world viewed America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, exposing murders of civilians and reports of torture that went unknown by the public. In her new memoir, titled ReadMe.Text, she explains the factors that drove her to leak the files, the consequences she faced, talks about her life in prison, and what life is like for her now. Welcome to Your Morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Chelsea, everything is in this book. We talk about trans rights. You have data security, whistleblower culture in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And you're 34. What a story.
It's a coming of age story, trials and tribulations of really a young person, at the age of 22, and sort of the events that transpired in my childhood and my upbringing, and obviously spending my 20s mostly in confinement. So, I really view this as like a story of how I've come to be the adult that I am now.
You start this book exactly where I would have wanted you to. It's the scene that was missing from my mind. It's you with borrowed Wi-Fi, wacky, wonky Wi-Fi, about to release 750,000 classified and secure documents with one eye on the clock and this terrible signal. Can you take me into what you were feeling right then?
My feelings were that, this was obviously something that I had thought about doing and really wanted. I'd spent, basically the previous 2 weeks trying to do. I had made attempts to reach out to the Washington Post, the New York Times. There was a sort of last-minute attempt to try to make it to Politico, which was across the river from me. And then there was this blizzard, and I had to dig a car out of the snow and find and the power was out at my aunt's house, and so I had to actually drive out to a Barnes and Noble, which had an attachment, Starbucks. And my thoughts and feelings in that moment were just sort of the extreme circumstances and the short amount of time that I had left. I just thought about just giving up right then and there and abandoning the entire thing and just saying, you know what, this is just not meant to be.
Wow, so close to this moment not happening, and it does. And you paid a huge price, arrested, tried, sentenced to prison for 35 years. You served 7 years in prison, nearly a year of which was in solitary confinement. And you remember a really specific sign from your time in solitary, and it read, "Built in Fort Wayne, Indiana." Why did that stand out for you?
It was the only thing I could read. It was the only text that I could read. I didn't have my glasses on either, so it was big letters. So it was really the only real detail, apart from it was dusty, it was hot. There were 2 air conditioners, only one of which seemed to work at any given time. And this is Kuwait in the middle of summer, and I'm basically in a cage, and what I call the tiger cage. Details become so much more important, like little tiny things, like the footfall of somebody walking. Like I can tell in that sort of state who a person is or what they're feeling or how fat, based on sort of the footfall that they're making and how far away they are. And I consider myself a very, informed citizen prior to this, very educated and self-aware of sort of things going on. But the vast discrepancy between what I knew, even whenever I was in the military, stateside, really whenever I started to feel this is whenever I started to feel like, oh gosh, I feel like this is something that I, as a educated and informed citizen, would want to know.
And I like that in this book, you give people a chance to know you in a fuller context, not just those moments in the coffee shop when you hit submit, but really who you were as a whole person leading up to and after.
Right, and you can't tell that story because it's an incomplete story otherwise, because otherwise you're just an anonymous person hitting the send button on a computer. A lot of events transpired in a very short period of time, but those moments don't define me. If anything, the rest of my life defined that moment.
I want to talk about your release from prison, because this is how you describe it. This was my first time as a free woman, quite literally. Even in prison, with restrictions on hair length and clothing, people had begun to accept me as a woman. They treated me as a human being, but now I needed to navigate a larger world with this new identity. Life in prison is regimented and predictable, but the real world is not. So how are you doing now?
It's been a struggle. It's a struggle to sort of live and to learn, because I'm essentially learning how to be an adult in my 30s as opposed to my 20s when whenever I was off doing other things. So now I'm learning and I'm adapting, but I'm also finding it frustratingly difficult being just being an adult in this world where you have credit reports, you have bank accounts, you have taxes, etc.
Listen, at the time that we are having this conversation, votes are still being counted in the U.S. midterm elections. I'm curious to know your thoughts as a transgender woman, as somebody who has been involved in the political process, as somebody who's an American. How are you feeling now?
Sure. Obviously, the last few election cycles, and ramping up in the U.S., trans issues have been raised increasingly by reactionary right-wing figures. Throughout history, we've faced this. The queer community and the trans community have faced this before, and we've survived. I'm confident that we'll be able to, regain that ground, in the years ahead.
Kelsey, it's been a fascinating conversation, and again, the book looks at these themes of truth and freedom and secrecy, and they wind your personal story amongst what happened with both your political and your military story. I want to thank you for writing the book, for chatting with us here today.
Great read.
Yeah, it's a human story. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.